Hello, welcome everybody. Hi. Let's all unmute for a minute and just wave and say hello.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so
Hello,
much for joining us.
everyone. Well, welcome to this 60-minute webinar in which we will explore 5 ways to live your purpose. We'll be drawing on the timeless wisdom of 2 of the world's most beloved mystics, Saint Francis and Saint Clare of Assisi. My name is Nina Hirlaender. I'm a sister of the Third Order of Saint Francis, and I'm the founder of Dancing Spirit Tours, where we guide people to sacred sites all over the world and do retreats. Places like Spain and France and Italy, where we walk in the footsteps of great saints, and also places like Iceland and England and Austria, where we discover the European shamanic traditions. Being a Franciscan, of course, my favorite place to journey is Assisi, Italy, the hometown of Francis and Clare.
Hi, everybody. My name is Robert Holden, and I'm so happy we're spending this hour together. Anytime I contemplate the lives of St. Francis and St. Clare, I always feel so enriched. And I always feel like it helps me to get sort of recentered, refocused, and ready for my life all over again. And it's particularly wonderful to do this with Nina as well. And Nina, thank you for wanting to do this together. It's really great that we're doing this. So let me tell you about the overview of this webinar, just to give you a little flavor of what we're up to. We're going to perform a centering practice together in a moment that will be led by Nina. We'll introduce you to St. Francis and St. Clare. We're going to share with you 6 ways, actually, to live your purpose. Originally, it was 5, but then we realized that that's an odd number, and we both wanted to do 3 each. So we'll share 6 ways to live your purpose, drawing on inspiration from St. Clare and St. Francis, of course. Then we'll have some time for Q&A, and then we'll tell you about the 7-week online pilgrimage called Make Me an Instrument. And we will also close with the wonderful St. Francis prayer. So that's our outline.
That sounds awesome. And I'm really excited to begin, everybody. We'll start with a centering practice. But first, I just want to say that people from all walks of life love St. Francis because his teachings are so universal. And together with his spiritual soulmate, St. Clare, they are all about joy. They are about simplicity, and they are about living a life in service in the name of love. So let's begin our time together with a prayer. I'd like to play for you a short video to take us to Assisi and steep us in that beautiful Franciscan energy. You might already be familiar with this prayer, but this version is from Francis's original testament, so it's a little different than the one that you probably know. Enjoy.
O divine love, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, your pardon. Where there is friction, let me bring union. Where there is error, let me speak truth. Where there is doubt, let me have faith. Where there is despair, let me bring hope. Where there is darkness, let me bring the light. Where there is sadness, let me bring joy. O Divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive. It is in pardoning that we are pardoned. And it is in dying that we are born to eternal life. Amen.
It's always wonderful to ground with a centering prayer. So,
and particularly that prayer.
yes, definitely.
Mhm. So, and some beautiful images in there, which obviously just get you reminiscing for Assisi and all of those wonderful occasions in that most wonderful of places. Yeah, very, very good. So let's start with introducing St. Francis and St. Clare. And I'll start with St. Francis. And so let's start by, I think, maybe recognizing that St. Francis was not a saint, not in his lifetime anyway. And actually, it's hard to imagine that he would have ever accepted the title of saint. I'm not sure he had any desire to be canonized by the church. His aim was really much higher than that. He wished to experience God. St. Francis was known simply to one and all as Francesco. I was reading a book recently called Radical Saints, and it really struck me that every saint really has been a radical person in their lifetime. I don't think there's any such thing as a conformity saint. You know, they're all radicals. Most saints are not saints until well after their death, of course. So most saints during their lifetimes were rebels and misfits and troublemakers and even heretics, which makes them rather interesting and well worth the study. They are revolutionaries who are challenging the status quo, helping us to birth a new normal, a better normal, and encouraging all of us to evolve and grow according to our faith. So Francesco was a pilgrim. And like the Buddha, he was born into great material wealth, but he rejected the fine silks and his family's high standing in society in order to search for and find something far more valuable. In his life, he took many pilgrimages, but in many ways, his whole life was this pilgrimage. He was dedicated to the Christ path. He followed in the footsteps of Christ. And on this path, he experienced a metanoia, a holy shift in which his view of himself and the world and all of us was transformed. Francesco was a romantic. As a young man, he has been described variously as a Giovanni Mante, a young lover, a handsome Lothario, a king of revelry, a roustabout, and a party animal. But his romantic adventures were not really satisfying to him. And again, he went in search of something far greater. And he became a devotee. The first line of the St. Francis prayer, which you've just heard, begins with, "O divine love." And there's your clue. There's your clue right there. There is a journey we make, I think, from romantic love to spiritual love. And Francesco yearned for this greater love. And there's a great story of when a friend asked him one day whether he was thinking of marrying, to which Francesco answered, yes, a fairer bride than any of you have ever seen. Francesco was also a poet. As a young man, he was a troubadour, and he often sang spontaneous songs to God, dancing in the streets like a holy fool, like a whirling dervish, like the Sufi poet Rumi, really. We have to remember that Francesco lived in a pre-literate society mostly, so not much of his ecstatic poem songs were recorded. But thankfully, we do have at least one gem. He wrote perhaps the greatest Italian poem ever, which is the Canticle of the Creatures. Francesco was also a mystic. So he was never a priest. He was never a theologian. He was not a scholar. He preached in Italian, not Latin. His path was much more of a mystical path. And a mystic is somebody who basically can tell us about a direct experience and not just the theory. He was a Christ mystic, so he experienced the Christ, not in a book, but in his heart. He was also a nature mystic. He understood that every creature is the word of God. Every being is the word of God. And I have a quote from you from Richard Rohr, one of the most beloved Franciscans of our age, who said, "The first act of divine revelation is creation itself. The first Bible is the Bible of nature. And it was written at least 13.8 billion years ago." So this first Bible, the Bible of nature, was something that I think Francis really understood. And he was an eco-theologian, and he understood that really every creature is expressing God to the best of their ability. So Francesco did become a saint after all, and after his lifetime. And saints are normally made saints because of their closeness to God. He was made a patron saint of Italy, along with Catherine of Siena. He's also the patron saint of ecology. And for me personally, I always like to say that St. Francis is my patron saint of purpose. St. Francis, together with his spiritual sister, St. Clare, gives us this practical blueprint for living a larger life that takes us way beyond the trappings of material wealth, a career path, and a social status. And their example is an inspiration to me. So that's St. Francis.
Well put, Robert. I love your summary. It just captures all the facets of his being. So let's talk about St. Clare then. Similar to Francis, Clare did not see herself as a saint, but Francis certainly held her in that regard. She was known to one and all by her Italian name, Chiara, which means light or bright lantern for the world. Chiara grew up in a wealthy household in the nobility class, and she and her family ran a homeless shelter out of their home. So Clare was doing that from a very early age. She witnessed Francis's spiritual transformation from this wild playboy poet to this holy man. And at the young age of 18, she decided to join him. But it's important to say that she was not simply a follower of Francis. She was a mystic in her own right, a visionary who taught people that contemplation leads to transformation. When we contemplate love, we are changed by it, and we let that love shine through us into the world. Chiara was a miracle worker. People came from all over Europe to be healed by her and to seek her guidance and counsel. She was also pen pals with the Pope. He relied on her counsel for monastic matters and many other things. Clare was a guardian. When Assisi was under attack, she stopped the army single-handedly because she believed in dialogue over retaliation. She appealed to the soldiers' intrinsic goodness, and they saw her authenticity. They saw her heart full of love, and they turned away in peace. Clare was an inspiration for Francis and for countless others, and she continues to be to this day. And for me, personally, Clare continues to show me that great joy can be found in radical simplicity. I just love these two.
Yeah, it's great to be in their presence again, for sure. So why don't we just share maybe a little bit about how we came across these two spiritual rebels, saints. How about you, Nina? How did you first find St. Francis and St. Clare?
Well, it was a decade ago now when I was bedridden with cancer. My dad gave me a book, like a little travelogue style book about Assisi. And St. Francis spoke to me through this book. It's funny because I had never heard of him before, but then suddenly after reading about Assisi, I just couldn't get him out of my head. And I was in a very vulnerable state at the time with being sick with cancer. And I really felt Francis holding my hand through the whole journey. He went with me to all my doctor's appointments. And then when I finally became cancer-free, my dad and we traveled on a pilgrimage to Assisi to thank Francis. And we were so moved while we were there, and we just could feel his spirit with us, that we decided to create a pilgrimage to introduce people to him and to tell his stories. And so I invited Carolyn Mace to join me on that pilgrimage, and we facilitated this pilgrimage to Assisi together for several years until Carolyn introduced me to the lovely Robert. And I am so thrilled to team up with Robert again for our 4th trip together this May, which marks my 9th journey to Assisi. And so that's how I met Francis, and that's how I met Robert. And you know, Clare was a quieter presence for me for a long time, until about 5 years ago when I was in Assisi. I had some time to share my desire to know her more deeply with my friend. My friend is a friar, and he lives at San Damiano, which is Clare's cloister, where she lived for 43 years. So he knows her well. And he said, come with me. And he invited me behind the monastery walls into this little chapel that I didn't know existed. It was Clare's private prayer room. He opened this heavy wooden door and then revealed this little chapel, this undecorated stone room with a simple altar. And I will never forget the feeling when he opened that door, because it was like a wave of grace just poured from the chapel and washed right through me. It was Clare. She really feels to me like an ocean of love. And she's been with me ever since. Those are the moments you don't forget on pilgrimage. It has a magical way of transforming us. So that's how I met Francis and Clare. Robert, how about you?
Well, I think, well, firstly, it was St. Francis. And like many of us, I think I really met St. Francis through his stories. You know, those stories that weave their way into our lives, stories that get told at school. I know both Bo, my daughter, and my son Christopher have both been taught about St. Francis at school, and we hear the wonderful stories, meeting the leper and meeting the wolf, and, you know, just those wonderful, wonderful tales. And in particular, the story of perfect joy, this dialogue that takes place between St. Francis and Brother Leo when they're on a journey from Perugia to the Porzincola. This story, or this description, really takes place within a dialogue, but a description by St. Francis of perfect joy really got my attention, because at the time I was running a project called the Happiness Project, and I was really wanting to explore the difference between satisfaction and joy. It struck me that most of the talk about happiness was really talk about satisfaction. I'll be satisfied if, when, and after I get this, that, and the other. Whereas joy seemed to have this independence of spirit, that it was like an unreasonable happiness that that doesn't, you don't have to go shopping for it. And that joy was something that I was making a contact with in myself at the time. So when I saw this story, it made perfect sense. And I think that's really how I sort of got to grips with St. Francis early on. But then after that, it was, you know, well, as you've mentioned, you know, Caroline Mace really introduced us to each other, Nina. I remember I was having dinner with Caroline. We were in Edmonton in Canada. We'd just both been giving talks earlier that day, and we sat down to dinner, and Caroline, I remember absolutely, she said, "Robert, St. Francis is calling you." And I said, "Is he?" "Tell me more." And then he explained all about that. She explained all about Dancing Spirit and Assisi, and how you were going to be in contact with me soon with an invitation to go to Assisi. And she said, "It's very simple, Robert. All you have to do is say yes." And I did, and I'm very glad that I did. And I have thanked Caroline many times ever since for the introduction. Because Nina, you, and without doubt, have absolutely also supported my sort of love for St. Francis and helped to deepen that. And you very much introduced me to St. Clare, because really I didn't know about St. Clare. And I think being on site in San Damiano, being there, getting that feeling for Clare is amazing. And I often say St. Francis is my patron saint of purpose, but I think of Clare as my patron saint of vision. You know, she had this extraordinary sense of vision, and of course she did it in such a different way to St. Francis as well. Two totally different styles. Wow, what a team. So then we had our first pilgrimage together, didn't we? 2016, I think, and many more to come, I hope. So yeah, very, very cool. So, okay, should we go into the 6 ways to live your purpose?
Let's do it, Robert. Why don't you give us way number 1?
All right, we'll start here. And once again, we'll have some Q&A time. So if there's anything you want to ask or any comments you want to make, just let's go for it. So I'm going to start with the inciting incident. If you reflect on your own life, I think you will find that somewhere in your life story, there was an inciting incident. I'm using a term that comes from the basic drama plot of life. The Greeks understood this. Stories begin with an inciting incident. Something gets our interest. And this inciting incident is how we begin. And in general, there are 2 broad categories of inciting incident. And these categories are sometimes referred to as the via positiva and the via negativa. The via positiva is an inciting incident that is often joyful, full of light, and very, very, it just gets your interest and you go, oh my God, what was that? I want to know more. And I imagine St. Clare had an experience a bit like this when she will have first witnessed St. Francis giving one of his impromptu sermons in the streets of Assisi. So that's your via positiva. And for me, for example, it was meeting my first spiritual teacher at the age of 18. He was unlike anybody I'd ever met before. I was completely fascinated by him, and I just wanted to spend as much time with him as possible. The other way is the via negativa. Now, the via negativa is something that certainly happened to St. Francis. So Francesco, at the age of 21, went to war. A war broke out between Assisi and Perugia, and Francesco signed up to the cavalry and he set out for battle, dressed in shining armor and fine clothing, playing the part of a knight. But upon this sort of bloody battlefield, Francesco was quickly outfought and he would have been killed. I think that's the general feeling. He would have been killed, except that the Perugian soldiers thought that he might be worth a ransom. So Francesco was actually thrown into an underground dungeon. And for a whole year, he hoped against hope that his ransom would be paid. Now, I just want you just to take a moment just to have a sense of that. These dungeons were not pretty places. There often was no light. They were damp, rat infested. You might come out of a place like this, but whether you would live for much longer having come out of a place like this, that was another matter. So this is a year of being plunged into darkness, and his eyesight withered, his health deteriorated. These were dank, septic conditions. And this was undoubtedly a dark night of the soul that he was thrown into. And of course, we don't really know what he went through in this time, but I think it is enough to say that something happened. There was an inciting incident that happened inside that well of darkness, which steered him along the way. There's a saying in Latin about light shining in the darkness. Big. And you have that lightness, which you don't expect it to come, but it comes. And it clearly came for St. Francis. And it comes for us too. And my via negativa was my father's alcoholism and my mum's depression, and also my own hole of darkness that I was in. And just when you don't think there's going to, you've given up all hopes for any light, some light comes. And I think that's the amazing thing. When you're living a life of purpose, it often begins with this inciting incident that can be joyful, but all too often is painful. It begins with a wound. It begins with a trauma. It begins with the death of normal. It begins with the plan for your life being all over. And yet, somehow, if we stick with it, we really can come through it. And in coming through it, we find there's a light we can follow after that. So that's way one.
All right. So way number 2 is reverence for the love in the natural world. This is an invitation to wake up to a sense of wonder. Often for us, it's reawakening that childlike spirit of enchantment. Now, you probably already knew Francis as the patron saint of ecology, but his love for nature is a mystical one. His passion for the natural world differs from our modern appreciation of nature, because the way that many of us talk about nature and the beauty of the natural world, about conservation of resources, even that language implies that our efforts are for the sake of utilizing nature for ourselves, that we should conserve nature for our own good. For Francis, it's different. For Francis, nature is his family. He called everything a sibling. Brother sun, sister moon, brother almond, sister turtle. Every interaction for Francis, whether with a grasshopper or with a human being, is an opportunity to connect with the divine. Francis said, every leaf, every blade of grass is a footprint that leads you to God. If you follow it, it will lead you through the doorway of the mundane into the heart of the shimmering reality itself. So do you see how a kinship worldview elevates environmentalism from stewardship of resources to its proper place, to reverence for the holy within all things? Part of our purpose right now as a species is this fundamental shift in how we perceive the world around us, the trees, the airs, the animals. Francis would tell you that you are living your purpose when you love everything around you as your brothers and sisters. So for us, we need to let nature wake us up to a sense of wonder. Because when you're in that flow, when you're in that harmony with the love that is within you and within all other things, the love that surrounds you, then that love will guide you moment by moment along this path of purpose. So that's way 2, is reverence for the love within all things.
Brilliant, Nina. And I'm really excited to dive more into that one together with you on the course, because it couldn't be more relevant, could it? Really, for these times that we're living in. Amazing. All right, way 3. I picked for way 3, I'm calling it the Audacious Move. And in one of my recent newsletters, I offered some, the newsletter was called Advice for Following a Life of Bliss. And I was telling the story of a meeting with Dorothy McLean, who's one of the co-founders of Findhorn and the author of a book called The Memoir of an Ordinary Mystic. And Dorothy received guidance, and her guidance was absolutely scintillating, sparkling, truly inspiring. But like a lot of guidance, it often can be a tad inconvenient in that it doesn't always go with the life you're already living. It requires some changes. And one of the pieces of guidance that Dorothy received is this piece. So this is what she wrote in her journal while she's listening to her inner voice. Leading a life of bliss entails canceling other engagements you have made habit to your body, to convention, to social codes, to others' opinions. In order to live our purpose, we have to say yes to something, but we also have to be willing to leave something behind. We have to be willing to leave behind that which no longer serves us. If you're on a path of purpose, you're on a path of growth, for sure. And for St. Francis, he had to leave behind his family fortune, the career path, the embroidered shoes, the wardrobe that he was there for him. And he had to leave behind the possessions. He even, famously denounced his father, which was a symbolic act, to leave behind an old life. St. Clare did the same thing too. You heard from Nina how she was from the sort of the society of nobility. She left it behind. They didn't know what was going to happen next. I think that's worth remembering. And so therefore, the question for us is, well, what is it that you're being asked to let go of today in order to say yes to your purpose more fully? And I find that this question comes around, is cyclical, often happens here in the Northern Hemisphere in the autumn, in the fall, when the leaves are falling. It's a good time to think about it. But what is it? It might be something to do with an old self-image. It might be to do with a grievance or a resentment that you're carrying that it's time to let go of. It might even be letting go of a job, for sure, or just an old way of doing things, and you're ready to bring a new attitude, a new approach to what it is you're doing. So when we're living a life of purpose, we have to be prepared to make audacious moves that to everybody else might not make sense, but deep down inside, they make sense to us.
I love this word, audacity. Robert and I were talking before the meeting about how this word has been coming up for both of us, and it certainly does encapsulate this energy of the saints, this radical way of loving, a totally different way of being. Audacity, love it. All right, so way number 4. We are more the same than we are different. Francis lived during a very difficult time. It was the time of the Crusades. So he witnessed violence. He witnessed people being divided by ideological differences. And we can certainly relate with our current global situation. We too live in a polarized time. So what did Francis do? Well, he traveled to the heart of the conflict in Egypt. Francis was compelled to apologize to the Sultan and to ask for forgiveness for what his Christian brothers were doing to the Muslim people. So Francis traveled across the sea and he arrived at the ornate royal tent of the Sultan, who, as it happens, was a learned Sufi master. The Sultan welcomes Francis. "Tell me of your faith," he says. "I want to know what sets your heart on fire." And so Francis shares passionately about Christ. The Sultan listens with deep appreciation. And at the end, the Sultan says in Arabic, La ilaha illallah. And Francis echoes this back in Italian. There is no God but God. And the Sultan adds, and Muhammad is his messenger. And Francis smiles, and Jesus is his word made flesh. And the two holy men burst out laughing, and they embrace one another as brothers. The Sultan thanks Francis. I will not become a Christian today, my brother, but your religion inspires me. And Francis replies, nor will I convert to Islam, though your prophet understands God. And they agree to pray for one another, and the two men part as soul friends. It bears repeating this simple wisdom. Despite our differences on the surface, we are all the same on the inside. And we need to remember our shared humanity, especially in times like today. So that's way 4. We are more the same than we are different.
Thank you, Nina. So way 5, I'm going to call it an evolving path. And yeah, this year I've been writing a book about purpose. And actually one big theme of the book is this idea that actually we don't have a unique purpose as such. We have a shared purpose that each of us expresses uniquely. And clearly this wonderful story of Francis and the Sultan, just demonstrates that beautifully. But for the evolving path of your purpose, I believe that your purpose is enfolded into your life from the beginning. And I believe that's true for all of us. So purpose is enfolded into your life in the beginning. And after that, it unfolds every step of the way. So the journey is an evolving path. And St. Francis's life and St. Clare's life, I think, are beautiful demonstrations of that. Neither of them really knew where they were going. They allowed themselves to be led. And I think a path of purpose is about allowing yourself to be led. That's why, quite honestly, it's often scary, too scary for some of us to contemplate, because we want to be in control of our lives. But it's not like that with the path of purpose. You are evolving each and every step of the way. And so for St. Francis, for example, when he received the call at that broken down church of San Damiano, when he heard that voice, rebuild my church, he set about rebuilding the church, literally, physically. And that was a great starting point for him. And I think it was very significant that he did that, by the way. I can't think of too many saints who have literally built a physical church with their hands. And I think probably during that time, doing that very hands-on work probably helped to incarnate more of his sense of purpose into his body, preparing his heart and his mind for what was about to come. After that, he founded the orders. He created a community. And again, this was, wonderful, fabulous work. Vital that he could share his purpose with others. But eventually, at Mount Laverna, when he experiences the stigmata, that really is symbolic of, I think, his overall message to us, which is that your purpose isn't something you do. Your purpose is who you are. And ultimately, the great work is to be yourself, as God made you. your original self, not your sociably fashionable self, but your real self. And daring to be that self is the great purpose of our lives. And St. Francis and St. Clare have done that. And I think they give us a great sense of, courage, really, to be the message, to be the teaching, and to be an expression of the purpose. And that's a wonderful thing, especially when so many people ask the question, when it comes to purpose, what should I do? Really, the question is are you willing to be more of who you are? That's number 5.
Beautiful, Robert. Thank you. Well, those are the 5 ways to live your purpose, but we have a bonus way, way number 6. And it is, let listening be your prayer. Your ability to live your purpose is directly related to how you listen. Clare says, God speaks to us in the silence. Before Francis devoted his life to the sacred, he very much questioned the meaning of his life. He even felt desperate at times. He often was searching. And one day, while wandering in the forest, looking for his purpose, as we do, Francis came upon this little abandoned chapel nestled in the trees. And he entered into this beautiful, quiet sanctuary. And he found this crumbling altar at the front, and he knelt before the altar in desperation. And he stopped and he closed his eyes and he empties his mind and he opens his heart. And Francis prays, God, cast your light into the darkness of my heart so that I may do what is truly your holy will. And then Francis does something he has not tried before. He listens intently. And in that silence, Francis hears the voice that he's been waiting for. God speaks to Francis's heart, and Francis discovers that this voice had been there all along. I think this is a lesson for us because our prevailing culture these days especially teaches us that we should keep busy, that we need to assert ourselves in the world. We need to make ourselves into a somebody. But Francis teaches us that we need to balance action with contemplation. We need to balance movement with stillness. We need to do less doing and more being, more listening. We need to get out of our own way so that we can become a conduit of love to flow through us. This is very via negativa, as Robert mentioned earlier. We need to empty ourselves so that we can be filled and so that the love can shine through us. And listening is the first step. Listening is a living prayer. Listening transforms you into an instrument of love. So way 6, let listening be your prayer. All right, well, Robert, we have 10 minutes left. How about we open to a few questions and then we'll talk a little bit about the pilgrimage, our online program, and we'll end with a prayer together.
Let's do it. Anybody want to ask anything? Any comments? There's a lot there for sure.
You can raise your hand physically or the little raise hand icon in the Zoom menu.
We always pack so much into our webinars, I appreciate it's a lot we've said, so.
Absolutely.
Right.
We do have some questions here. How about Angela and then Lena and then Marina? Okay, so let's go to Angela first. I'm going to ask to unmute, and then you just have to accept that. There we go. Hi, Angela.
Thank you. Oh, thank you for this beautiful, beautiful webinar. I'm so grateful. May I just be very honest and vulnerable to say that I am with you and get what you're saying. And I worry about my busy mind. Contemplation begins with a lot of noise for me, and I'm embarrassed to say it, but have you a thought for me, please?
Well, Angela, I just say, welcome to the club. I mean, welcome to the Busy Mind Club. Welcome to the Noisy Mind Club. Please don't be embarrassed. I mean, that's why we do this work, because it's so noisy and busy inside. It takes me a long time to settle down often. And all I'd say is just try your very best just to make friends with the busyness and the noise. It's okay. It really is okay. It's the way of things. But thank goodness you have a practice, and just thank yourself every time you sit on your meditation seat, or you visit your yoga mat, or you take a walk in nature. Just remember to thank yourself, Angela, and that will hopefully support you in just staying true to your practice.
Thank you, Robert.
Thank you, Angela, for being vulnerable with us and sharing your struggles.
Yeah.
I think that's a challenging and brave thing for you to do. I too struggle with a busy mind. I think all of us do. I know Clare did. That's why she developed a contemplation technique called Mirror of Eternity meditation, which we'll be going through in our online course. But I think one thing I'll say about what Clare said about this busy mind is that it's a myth to imagine that the mind is supposed to still and be empty and you're not supposed to think at all. This is very much a journey. And so I imagine Clare would tell you to be gentle with yourself, because you're doing the best that you can. And it's coming back to the practice again and again. That's the purpose, really. It's not about the outcome. There's no such thing as perfection.
Thank you.
Thank you, Angela.
All right, Lena. Lena, where did you go? There's so many people on the screen. I'm trying to find you.
I can't see Lena now. Let's go to Marina.
Okay, let's go to Marina, and then we'll go back to Lena if she can raise her hand again. Okay, Marina, I'm going to ask to unmute you. All right, go ahead.
Hey, hi, everybody. You see me?
Yes, thank you, Marina.
I don't know how, is my video working? I don't see myself actually on the video.
Yep.
It was nice. It was interesting, actually. I liked it. I mean, heard a lot of things that I already knew. I'm from a Catholic country. I'm not a Catholic, not a practicing Catholic, but I'm from a Catholic country, Croatia, and very close to Italy, where I've been many times. And it was interesting, many things. Actually, I like this, which has been said so many times, but I like this, that your life, you yourself as a person, is some sort of a purpose, which is good to be reminded of. I don't have a busy mind, luckily, although I'm a translator and a writer. I have quite a lazy mind, which needs to be prodded, but I have a doubtful mind, which I suppose everybody does. And a lot of dilemmas about why I actually exist, although I've done everything that should be done, in life, like children, career, and so on. And this was quite supportive. Thank you.
Thank you, Marina. That's very lovely to hear. Appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you so much, Marina, for reflecting.
Thank you, guys.
And it's lovely to have someone join us from Croatia. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
I suppose nobody's from Croatia and so close to Italy, are they?
Oh,
we're a
great.
very international crowd. We've got over 600.
Yeah, I see from the names.
Yeah, we're always international with St. Francis and St. Clare.
Yeah.
It's one of
Well,
the
we
great
just have a few minutes left here, Robert. So in order to honor everybody's time, do we
Yep.
want to briefly touch on our 2 announcements, and then we'll
Yep.
do a closing prayer together?
Please, let's do that.
So Robert and I are thrilled to tell you about our pilgrimage to Assisi, which many of you have already heard about, and we've been mentioning throughout this webinar. It's called Living Your Purpose Pilgrimage to Assisi, and it's a 9-day journey where we visit the sacred sites of Francis and Clare, and we stay in this beautiful, exclusive Italian villa run by my family friends, and you'll meet friars and sisters from Assisi and hear their stories. And we have daily workshops in the classroom and in the sacred sites themselves, and meditations, homemade Italian pasta, and more cappuccino than you can possibly handle. So it's always such an enriching time to be really steeped in the energy of Francis and Clare. And if these 2 mystics speak to you, then I think you will enjoy this journey. Registration is now open. So if you want to register for that, if you want to reserve your spot, Donna will put a link in the chat. She did there just now, Living Your Purpose, and you can click on that, or you can visit dancingspirittours.com. So Robert, do you want to tell us about our other offering?
Yeah, so, well, first and foremost, the pilgrimage to Assisi is truly a life event. It's an amazing experience to do, and I feel so lucky, to have done 1 or 2 of those now. They are really amazing. Obviously, once COVID happened, we knew we couldn't go to Assisi for a while, so we wondered, well, what should we do about that? And we created an online pilgrimage, and the online pilgrimage is Make Me an Instrument. And the online pilgrimage, which we have already run once, we'll run again starting this November 9th. And it's a multimedia program, which is based around 7 live classes, where we really dive deep into these great themes that we've introduced you to, and others. But it isn't just the classes. We also have this Q&A podcast thing that we do, which is a bit like Franciscan radio for the soul.
Which is so much fun. It's probably my
Lots of
favorite
fun.
part.
Really enjoy that. Some of the meditations that we do as well, I think from the sort of, which really are inspired by Franciscan theology, are just some of my all-time favorite meditations. They're amazing. For me, absolutely standout is Nina's films. Nina is an amazing filmmaker, and she's captured so much film from Assisi that she just makes these outstanding films about Assisi, and they are truly brilliant. And they are a big part of our program as well. And we have obviously the supportive community. We've got the weekly assignments. And a lot of those are really profound and great fun, I think, it's fair to say. And it's just a super program. It really is. It's so robust. It's so well supported. The technical support's brilliant as well. And it's just a joy. So we'll be running that program from in November, and it'll take us all the way up to Christmas, which is also extra special because, of course, St. Francis really resurrected the nativity for us. I mean, without St. Francis, we might not even experience, Christmas in the way that we do. So that's amazing in itself. So it'll take us into a Franciscan Christmas time, which will be really, really exciting as well. And so registration for that is open today. And as a thank you to everybody who's sort of signed up for this webinar, you will get $100 off the program if you use the code EARLY100. You'll get an email tomorrow from the team with that information. Okay, so that's available to you too. All right. Should we finish with the prayer?
Let us do that. Let us all just find our stillness, find our place of center, and come together energetically wherever we are in the world right now. O divine love, make me an instrument of your peace.
And where there is hatred, let me sow love.
Where there is injury, pardon.
Where there is friction, union.
Where there is error, truth.
Where there is doubt, faith.
Where there is despair, let me bring hope.
Where there is darkness, light.
Where there is sadness, joy.
O divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console.
To be understood as to understand.
To be loved as to love.
For it is in giving that we receive.
It is in pardoning that we are pardoned.
It is in dying that we are born to eternal life. Amen.
Thank you.
What an absolute joy it was to be here with all of you. Thank you all so much for coming. And Robert, I just love doing this with you. It's always so much fun. I can't wait for our program. It's going to be awesome this year.
Me too. Very excited. Thank you to the team for putting it together. Thank you one and all for being with us, and hopefully we'll see you soon.
All right, I'm going to linger around a little bit to answer some of the questions in the chat, but farewell, everybody. Have a wonderful day. We hope to see you in the program.
See you now.
Bye.